Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and let's talk about the greatest Western ever made. From Japan.
Revenge of the Remakes.
So for this installment of Revenge of the Remakes, I'm going to be talking about the 7 movies. No, not seven, but like 7 Samurai, Magnificent Seven, you get the idea. Now the legacy of this story is legendary because so many directors were influenced from the original 1960 version and the original 7 Samurai before it. Directors like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg were greatly influenced by Kurosawa's original run of samurai movies, and you can feel that influence throughout most of cinema today. So I guess it's no surprise that in 1960 Kurosawa's 7 Samurai was adapted for American audiences into The Magnificent Seven, and then again in 2016 it was remade starring Denzel Washington. But in order to really compare these 3 movies, which, I mean, that's what I'm here to do after all, I gotta go all the way back to feudal Japan as depicted by 1954 in Kurosawa's original 7 Samurai. Now 7 Samurai, while it was incredibly popular in both Japan and America, there's still a lot of people my age or younger that has maybe never even heard of 7 Samurai. And that's probably because it's in Japanese, it's subtitled, it's in black and white, and it's 3.5 hours long. Yeah, not really the best movie to just kind of pop on casually. But I tell you, if you give this movie your patience, you'll walk away having witnessed a masterpiece. This movie really is a masterpiece, and if I were to judge all 3 of these Magnificent Sevens on quality of storytelling, 7 Samurai wins. It's no contest. Kurosawa uses those 3.5 hours to really develop each samurai and develop the world that they live in a way that just can't be done as effectively in a shorter runtime. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What is the story of the 7 Samurai? Well, stop me if you've heard this one before. A small village of peace-loving farmers gets attacked repeatedly by bandits, and in an act of desperation, they go out in the town looking to hire some warriors to come in and kick the bandits out. And in their search, they come across and recruit 7 samurai that come back to the village, fortify the village, prepare the farmers for the fight that's coming, and you have your big climactic fight and the villagers win. Are you starting to see how this formula adapts itself well to the Western genre? I mean, we've got the Magnificent Seven movies. We've also got the Man with No Name trilogy that uses basically the same idea. You've got Tombstone, along with an episode of Firefly and The Mandalorian that uses the same idea. So yeah, this formula has kind of been done to death, but what can I say? It's always fun to watch. And although I did just say that this movie develops each samurai beyond just their archetypes, for the sake of consistency as I compare all 3 versions, I am just going to refer to them as their archetype, or if it's a notable actor, I'll just refer to them as their actor's name, because honestly, the names given to these characters really don't matter. They're really there either for star power or to serve a function in the story. And in the 7 Samurai, we start off with the leader, who is this old, bald samurai, and we're introduced to him shaving his head so that he can disguise himself as a monk to rescue a small child that was used as a hostage. But then shortly after, we're introduced to the kid of the story, an ambitious teenager who wants to be taught by this old man so that he can be a fully trained samurai. But then in the same scene, we're also introduced to this other samurai who's arguably the most hilarious character in this movie. He has a name, but I'm just going to refer to him as the Drunk. And that's because this guy, he just is perpetually drunk. Even when he's sober, he still acts drunk. Like, he's all full of energy, he's all over the top dramatic, he cracks jokes, he insults the farmers, he does it all, and he's a lot of fun to watch. But on top of that, he is a wannabe samurai. He really wants to be a samurai. That's his one big dream in the world. And that's because this guy wasn't born in the samurai class. And with all his posturing, he was born a farmer and wants to do everything he can to hide that fact from the public. And there's a nice touch in this movie to make him even more of a wannabe, where he's carrying this gigantic sword. It looks like a katana, but I'm pretty sure it's too big to be a katana. It's probably the next size up sword. I can't remember what it's called, but there is a sword bigger than a katana that was used in that time. And that's the sword that he carries around while everybody else just carries the regular, smaller katana. He's clearly compensating for something. But after him, we're introduced to the best friend, who actually was a stranger a moment ago. Him and the leader have no previous history. They just met in this recruiting process, but they become fast friends, they like each other, and they become more or less the partners of the group. And you're going to see this archetype explored a lot more in the other movies, but here it's more of a small thing that just helps to create solidarity within the group so that they can split off and recruit separately but still trust each other. But this guy's a lot of fun too. He's a little bit overweight, he's happy all the time, he's just a good guy to have around. But then we get the old warrior friend who did fight alongside the leader in some previous war, and they do have a bit more chemistry and a bit more history, but they've been out of touch for a while. But upon meeting each other again, they get to catch up and they become friends all over again. And this guy, aside from the leader, is probably the wisest of all the samurai. He carries himself in a much different way. Most of the samurai either carry themselves in a very stoic, reserved attitude, or they're more of a hotshot goofball type samurai that just likes to have a good time. This guy, he's a bit different altogether. He treats everybody as equals. He'll laugh when they laugh, he'll cry when they cry, and he takes it upon himself to train all the villagers with their makeshift bamboo spears. But now we come to the wood chopper. This guy is an old legend. He was someone back in the day that killed countless people, and now he's out of work. He's chopping wood behind someone's shed for very little money. But he balances the line of wit and stoicism very well, and he's always interesting to watch. You never know quite what he's gonna say. Is he gonna make a joke, or is he gonna say something really profound? He's definitely one to keep an eye on. And last but not least, we come to probably my favorite samurai, the only one that's ever called magnificent in this movie, and that is the duelist. You have this incredible duel scene between him and a competitor where they test each other's speed with a katana, but, you know, because it's all good sport, they're using bamboo. But the challenger thinks that he won, that he was faster, and everybody else says, no, dude, you lost. Move along. But of course, he's been drinking a little too much sake, so he's not rational. And they challenge each other with real swords, and go figure, the duelist wins. And I guess this is about as good a time as any to talk about the action in this movie. The action is pretty solid. If you like seeing people get chopped down with katanas, this is your movie. Katanas are really the primary weapon in this story. And that's probably the biggest difference between this movie and future installments. Because it's handled mostly with katanas, there are a few muskets and some bows and arrows, but really, the primary weapon for these samurais is the katana. And because of this, the kills are a lot more up close and personal, which means you really feel the weight of each person that dies in this movie, on both sides. The bandits only have 40 guys, so as the waves keep coming, and they keep picking them off one at a time, the samurai and the audience keep a running tally of, okay, how many guys are left? How many do we still have to worry about? How many can we let in at a time? It's that kind of strategy that makes this movie really fantastic. And while I'm talking about the action, this movie also has the oldest use of slow-mo that I've ever seen. Whenever Kurosawa wants to focus on the death of a character, he'll film the action of them getting sliced or slashed or whatever in real time, but then linger on the shot of the person dying and watching them fall in slow motion. Like I said before, it really helps us feel the loss of life that's happening in this movie. That even though these are bandits and bad guys, they're still dying, and that is a big deal. And another thing to consider when watching or revisiting Seven Samurai is that it really is a story about class. More so in this movie than any other version, the idea that the samurai and the farmers are of different classes and that there's tension there is very powerful here. They take the time to establish that the farmers are scared of these samurai. That because of what happened a generation ago in the Japanese Civil Wars, the samurai are seen as the bad guys. They're seen as just as bad as the bandits. That during the wars they came in and burned their crops, killed their children, raped their women, did all kinds of unspeakable horrors. And that fear is very much felt in this present day. When the samurai arrive, they hide all their women away, and all the men hide too because they don't want to get killed. But it's through the course of this movie where the two classes kind of come together and find some solidarity in their common enemy, even though there still is quite a bit of uneasiness and shame that happens when the samurai kid sleeps with the villager's daughter. And I'm not one for unnecessary love interests, but I thought this love interest worked really well, not just because they're cute and romantic with each other, but because it does bring up real issues about class in Japan. But after everything's said and done, all the fighting's over, 4 out of the 7 are dead. And those are the drunk, the duelist, the best friend, and the woodchopper. They unfortunately don't make it, but their graves are memorialized in this incredible shot of these 4 mounds with katanas sticking out of them that commemorate these 4 fallen warriors. And that shot, that is an image that has stuck with me since the first time I saw this movie. It's such a beautiful shot, and I love it so much. But even with this loss of life, the farmers go back to planting for next season. They're happy, they're celebrating, and the samurai that survived are just kind of tossed aside. They don't really get to enjoy any of it. And that's why at the very end, the leader says that this is a victory for the peasants. It's their victory, not ours. And the samurai just go on their way. And it's a very bittersweet ending because you've come to really respect and like these samurai, and you're kind of bummed when they don't get the recognition that they deserve. But that is the nature of feudal Japan. Alliances may form, but at the end of the day, you just go back to your class. That is except for the kid. He renounces his samurai heritage and everything, and he stays behind to be a farmer with his farmer girlfriend. So at least he gets a happy ending. But now let's talk about the remake, the first remake, and see how it fared compared to the original. Well, the remake is a classic of Hollywood cinema. It is one of the greatest westerns ever made. It's fantastic. It's magnificent, even. Now, the story is basically the same, except replace samurai with gunslingers and feudal Japan with the Old West, and boom, there's your movie. And it really is the same story. You've got these bandits that come in and rough up a village in Mexico. They're scared, they don't have weapons, they don't know how to fight. They go into town, recruit some gunslingers. They recruit 7 of them, the gunslingers come back, defend the town, they win, 4 gunslingers die, and the survivors go on their merry way with the kid staying behind to, be a farmer with his girlfriend. Yeah, they really didn't change much, but what this version does have is star power. They got some big name actors from back in the day. They got the King of Siam, Yul Brynner, to be the leader. They got Steve McQueen to be the best friend. They got Charles Bronson to be the wood chopper. They got James Coburn to be the duelist. And they got Robert Vaughn to be the old soldier friend from back in the day. And rounding out the cast, you have the kid and the criminal, Harry. Now, Harry's kind of a new addition to this cast. Everybody else is pretty much a one-to-one comparison to the archetypes in the previous version. But Harry's new. He's a criminal. He's not a scrupulous guy, and he's really all in it for the money. He believes there's some gold or jewels or silver or something hidden away in these hills, and that's why the bandits are after it. But it's not. That's not why they're there. He's completely just drawn to what he wants to believe, that he completely disregards what's here. And that does make for a pretty interesting character, although he doesn't get that much screen time and it's not developed that much. I guess what they tried to do is take the drunk from the original and give the scenes where he's trying to prove himself and being all insecure and everything to the kid, and give the scenes where he's more mean-spirited and selfish to Harry, the criminal. But aside from that strange choice, everything else pretty much falls in line. And I think they had to do that because of the one really big difference that you just can't translate as well from the original Seven Samurai to the American Magnificent Seven movies, and that is this idea of class. Now, I talked about how class was a big deal in the original Seven Samurai, and in the Old West, there really is no class. It's really just whoever knows how to use a gun and whoever has money, they're the upper class. There's a reason they call it the Wild West, because there was very little rules or structure. Everything was kind of fend for yourself, and if you survived the winter, well, there you go. But even so, being able to carry a gun and being good with it does have its advantage. So I guess there is a little bit of a difference there, but not nearly to the degree of the strict caste system of Japan. And because of that, the fear and mistrust of these 7 strangers doesn't really exist. I mean, it does. They're still wary of them because they're gunslingers and bounty hunters and criminals and in this ragtag group, and they're strangers. But it doesn't have nearly the weight that the original had. But that's not to say this movie doesn't have tension. It sure does. In fact, when we're introduced to Yul Brynner and Steve McQueen, the leader and the best friend, they're in this incredibly tense situation where they're the only ones willing to drive a hearse carrying a dead Indian up to a white man's cemetery. Now, you could probably see why in the late 1800s that would have been a very risky play. And this movie plays it up. That's probably the most intense scene in the movie. And only a few gunshots get fired. Most of it is just them looking around nervously to make sure that nobody's sneaking up on them. And I have to admit, replacing the katanas with revolvers was a genius move. Just by nature of it being a ranged weapon and having different types of guns, shotguns, rifles, pistols, you can do so much more in terms of action. And the action scenes don't disappoint. When the shootouts go down, it is entertaining, it's fun, it's a blast. It is heartbreaking at times because, again, 4 do die. And it's not exactly the 4 that died in the original, but there are some similarities. The woodchopper still dies, the duelist still dies, the criminal dies, which I guess you could compare him to the drunk, and the old war friend dies, where he did survive in the original. But when each of these 4 gunslingers die, you do feel the weight, and they do send them off in an appropriate way. Each person with their own personality, they get a nice death. But there is one thing that this version has that is significantly better than any other version, and that is they got Eli Wallach, yes, the ugly guy from Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. They got him to be the head bandit in this movie. And he has so much personality. If you've seen Eli Wallach in anything, Batman, you know that this guy brings it to any role. And he's just so good at being a villain. He's repulsive to look at, especially when he's eating, but he also brings a surprising level of sympathy that we don't get from any of the other versions. First of all, he's the only one that doesn't kill any of his own men. And second, we understand why he's doing what he's doing. He's doing it to keep his men and horses fed. Otherwise, they'll just die out in the wilderness. So while you can clearly see that he is in the wrong, that you shouldn't rob people, you do understand why he is doing what he's doing, and that makes him a really compelling villain. But now let's talk about the most recent remake, the 2016 Magnificent Seven. And how does this story go? Well, you've got bandits again, and they attack a small village of unarmed farmers in California this time, where before it was Mexico. And out of their desperation, they go into town and recruit a bunch of gunslingers to help restore their town back to its former glory, scare away the bandits, and, live in peace and harmony. Same exact story once again. 4 gunslingers die, 3 survive. What did you expect? Although this version does take a bit more liberties than the other remake. For instance, the villain, played by Peter Skarsgård, is not a bandit necessarily. He's a robber baron. He's a capitalist. He's after this land because it's worth something. He wants to buy up all their land, and he's got a brute squad of God knows how many people to force these peasants out. So it goes without saying, Peter Skarsgård is no Eli Wallach, and he kind of falls into the Seven Samurai trap of just having the villain be this kind of cartoonish monster. The villain in Seven Samurai had an eye patch, for crying out loud, as if it wasn't obvious enough he was the bad guy. But while Skarsgård doesn't have an eye patch, he is this cartoony capitalist bad guy that we've seen in countless Disney movies by now. But who are the 7 in this version? Well, we've got the leader, Denzel Washington this time, and he fills that role perfectly. You've got his best friend, Chris Pratt, who just seems to be born to play a cowboy, doesn't he? Like, seeing him in Jurassic World and as Star-Lord, like, he just got that cowboy renegade energy, and I like seeing him in this role. I want to see him in more westerns. And while they don't get to bond over bringing a dead Indian up to a white man's cemetery, they do get to bond over an absurdly entertaining shootout in a bar. Then we also get the criminal. He's a Mexican wanted man, bandit. He killed somebody, and this is his way to redemption. You get the duelist. He's Chinese in this version, and he is really good with a knife. I mean, James Coburn's duelist was good with a knife, but this guy, he's really good with a knife. They take a lot more advantage of his knife techniques in the gunfights in this version. And then we get the old war buddy, played by Ethan Hawke. And while Robert Vaughn definitely showed some PTSD, Ethan Hawke really plays it up. They make it a lot more central to his character in how he's seen so much death during the Civil War that he just can't bring himself to shoot somebody now. And we also get the woodchopper, who is a bit different in this version. It's Vincent D'Onofrio, and he is just a bear. Like, he literally looks like a bear. He's this big, hairy guy who lives up in the mountains. He doesn't have much contact with people, but he is the legend. He's killed a lot of people in the past. He's a big name, so that part is consistent. And he's kind of down on his luck, but I am kind of bummed we don't see him actually chopping any wood in this version. Although he does use an axe quite a bit in chopping into people. So I guess that kind of makes up for it. And rounding out the 7, we get the Native American, who honestly, he doesn't do much. He's actually kind of wasted, and that kind of makes me sad. I'm 100% on board with having a diverse Magnificent Seven. I think that's a great idea. You can have an Indian, you can have a Chinese man that's really good with blades, you can have a black man that's a bounty hunter, and you can have a Mexican bandit. These are all things that existed in the West, so making this ragtag group of people, it makes sense to have a diverse cast. The only downside is that because this film is so much more of an action movie than the other two, the characters aren't as deep. And when you bring in an Indian or a Mexican, you really want to flesh them out so that they don't just feel like tokens. And here I kind of feel that way with a couple of these guys. I feel like they should have been given more unique personalities and motivations and just more to them. Because we don't really get the kid in this version. We get a farmer who kind of pals around with these guys, recruiting them. And we've had this character in all the other versions, but here they try to give him the scenes that were originally for the kid character. Like the scene where he needs to clap his hands before the gun can get drawn. Well, they do something similar here with the magic trick Chris Pratt does to try to teach him how to, be a faster gunslinger. But it doesn't resonate at all because as soon as they get to town, he just kind of blends in with everybody else. He's not even part of the 7, he's the 8th, and he's just kind of forgotten about. But let's talk about the action here, because like I said, this is primarily an action movie. There is a lot of action, there's a lot of gunfights, there's a lot of really cheesy, over-the-top, western-y fight scenes, which honestly just makes these scenes so much more fun to watch. Every western action cliche is in here. You have people getting shot, you have people falling over railings, you have people falling off of high places, you have bar fights, you have standoffs, you have glass being smashed over people's heads, you have people being shot in the hand. You have Vincent D'Onofrio running into a building and throwing a dude out of the window. And if I'm being honest, that may be my favorite Western cliche. I just love the idea of going into a building, you don't know what's going on, and then all of a sudden, psh, they come flying out of a window. This movie is just so entertaining with its action. But I guess this really is the biggest difference with this new Magnificent Seven compared to the others. The original Seven Samurai was very serious. It was a very bittersweet movie about class and doing the right thing. The original Magnificent Seven was less about class, but more about doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And while this new movie definitely has some of those deeper tones, it plays itself less of a realistic reflection of the West and more like Westworld's reflection of the West. Something that's clearly designed to entertain and get your heart pumping and get you excited about just that nostalgia of the West. Which is still very entertaining, but just not as deep as the other movies. But there is something that this new movie did that honestly surprised me, because it's something that was in the original Seven Samurai that the 60 version didn't do. And that is including a big, intimidating weapon that the good guys don't have access to that the bad guys do. And in Seven Samurai, it was the muskets. You could imagine muskets pretty hard to come by in feudal Japan, but they did exist, and the bandits had 3 of them. Now, over the course of the movie, they whittle it down to 2, and then to 1, and then, they're all dead. But this was still a big obstacle that the samurai had to overcome. And in the 60 version, there really is no such weapon. Everyone just kind of has the same guns, and they just do what they can to not get shot. But in the 2016 version, the bad guys have a Gatling gun. And this thing is bad news for the gunslingers in the town, because they just are forced to just take cover, and they can't do anything until like the minute and a half that gun takes to reload. And it really is a pretty accurate adaptation of both the reload time and just the fear that a bandit having a musket in feudal Japan would bring. So I do credit this version for not just looking back to the original Magnificent Seven, but going all the way back to Seven Samurai for inspiration. So those are the 3 Seven movies. It's the same story, sure, but these directors have taken this very basic story and explored it in very different and unique ways. And if you were to ask me which version is the best, well, it really depends on what you're looking for. Are you looking for just a good old-fashioned Western with a lot of heart? Well, I would recommend the original Magnificent Seven. Are you looking for some exciting popcorn entertainment with charismatic actors with just all the shootouts and gunplay you could ask for? Well, then I'd recommend the 2016 remake. Are you interested in something deeper and more moving that still has plenty of action, but really explores the cultural differences between classes in feudal Japan? Well, Seven Samurai is the movie for you. But for me, while I do love Seven Samurai, and it is definitely the best crafted movie, if you were to ask me which one is objectively the best, it's Seven Samurai. But I'm not always in the mood for something as heavy as Seven Samurai, and I'm also not always in the mood for sitting through some long dialogue scenes in the original Magnificent Seven. So if you were to ask me which version would I rather watch on any given day, it's probably going to be the 2016 remake. It's just a lot of fun, and it still hits all the beats that a good Magnificent Seven movie should hit. It just does it with a faster pace, cooler action, and some really hilarious moments. So yeah, that's what I think about the Seven movies. They're all great for what they are, and I would love for the 2016 Magnificent Seven to get a bit more recognition. But now I turn it over to you guys. What is your favorite Seven movie? What's the one that really hits home for you? And if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content, and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. And as always, I'm Colby. This is my nerdy talk, and I'll see you in the next video.